Coming up, panelists. So clearly, the three of us speakers tonight typed into ChatGPT, "What do you wear for a panel?" And then this is what you get out of it.
I'm gonna tell my kids this was the Swedish House Mafia.
So I am super pumped to have you both with us tonight because for anyone who is building or honestly just even living in the world today, AI is moving fast as shit. And our team just had an offsite today, even as a VC fund trying to navigate this. You both as founders are navigating it. And really, as I look around the room, whether you launched your company pre-ChatGPT or post-ChatGPT, which is like the new timeline these days, there is so much going on, there's so much impact, and I'm really pumped to have Brad with us from Superblocks, who has tweaked a little bit the product direction, Meryl, who has added from Graphite to the product capabilities, and we're going to cover a lot from their journey across the why, the what, and the how. And we'll do that for a while, and then there's going to be room for questions at the end. So definitely, as we're talking, make sure if you have any questions, you can take them down as notes, and then we'll make sure to cover them later. But let's give a round of applause to our panelists. So Brad, let's start with you. Maybe you can give a one-liner on what Superblocks was in the first iteration, and then let's walk through your thought process as the world is changing, especially as code gen tools, vibe coding has come out. What are some of the thought processes that even went into your head?
Yeah, so we started the company 4 years ago, and it was a low-code product for enterprises to build internal apps. And so that was great 4 years ago. Things are going really well, and then all of a sudden with AI, this idea of vibe coding comes out. And this is started maybe 6-7 months ago. Replit, Lovable, Bolt, V0, et cetera. And so what ended up happening is, since that kind of November, December period last year, we started seeing that certain customers were like, hey, this is a much better experience. And we looked at it and we're like, they're right. And so, basically what we did was we made a big bet. And the big bet was, we were going to become an enterprise vibe coding company. So everything we took from our original product, which was all the governance, data integration, permissioning, et cetera, and then we were going to go all in on code gen. And so we had to rip out the core engine of the product and turn it from like a domain-specific language or DSL into code. And we had to basically rebuild the whole experience. And so we made this big bet. We did a launch recently and had it actually went viral on X, and we had like 2 million views and like thousands of companies come inbound, and so we had to make the big bet.
So let's unpack that a little bit, because right now I saw that viral launch went amazing and the video was super cool. What are some of the things that even in your head, right? You're saying, hey, we had this product. You had some customers even using it. You had engineers that had poured countless hours. You had salespeople trying to sell it. How do you approach having to just fundamentally like burn the boats and make this bold bet?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, as we were thinking through it, the hardest part was how do you build a new product while supporting the existing customer base? And we were doing it incrementally at first. We were supporting the existing customer base on the original product, we call Superblocks 1.0 internally, and then we were building, for this new AI world. And at a certain point, it was just too slow, and we had to go all in. And so we kind of made the decision that, we had to, I'm from Canada, so there's a saying, skate to where the puck is going, famous Wayne Gretzky quote. And we basically said, we're going to go skate to where the puck is going. We're going all in, and if we don't go all in, the market's moving so quickly that if we don't do this, someone else will, and it'll be too late. So time was kind of the essence.
Awesome. I want to turn it over to Meryl in a second, but we are going to dig into some of the team dynamics at play. But yeah. Meryl, give a quick one-liner also on what V1 of Graphite was, or even 1.5 in your case, and then how you thought about this really extension of the product.
Yeah, so in the very beginning, we were building a new code review workflow platform that was inspired pretty closely by some of the internal tools that we'd had at places like Meta and Google that had these challenges of scale where they have thousands and thousands of engineers distributed around the world, all trying to collaborate on one piece of code at the same time. And GitHub kind of falls over at that scale. They needed to build their own solutions. And we, as a team, we'd all been at those companies. We'd seen what those tools were like. We really missed working with those and wanted to basically rebuild them for startups that are just starting out. That was in the very beginning. We were just focused on the workflow side of it, and then about a year ago, Sonnet 3.5 drops, and all of a sudden AI is just amazing at writing code, it's really good at understanding code, and you had this shift where now 10-person companies are now functioning more like 100-person companies, and 100-person companies are 1,000-person companies, and so on. And so the window of companies that were interested in a tool for accelerating code review and everything that happens after the code gets written has now just shifted massively to the point where what we were building became more interesting for everybody. And not only that, I think AI then gave us an amazing tool that we could use to kind of address the problem that it was creating. And not only AI is not only great at generating code, it's also great at understanding it and revising it. And we had the trust of companies like Shopify, Datadog, Snowflake. We're operating at that scale and we're already in those places, and we could more easily then apply AI and build a product that was compelling to customers at that scale.
How big was your engineering team when you started thinking about this extension? And then how did you resource between the core product or V1.5 and then the new extension?
Yeah, I think we were about 10 to 12 engineers at the time that we started. And in the beginning, it started actually as one of my co-founders and our CTO, Greg, it started as like a side project of his, essentially, where he would build an AI code reviewer. At first, it was just a naive implementation of, give it the diff and ask it to generate a set of comments. And it was really noisy. Every now and then he'd turn it on and everybody would complain and we'd have to shut it down. And this happened like a few times. Basically, every time that the foundation models got a big update, he would run this experiment again. Inevitably, they'd shut it down. And I think 3.5 was the first moment where we did that, and there wasn't an immediate tomato throwing. It was like, this is actually close. It's not there yet, but there's a clear line of sight for how do we get from like where we are just with the naive approach to refining this and getting this to something that we could actually see shipping to customers.
And did then you hire more people to start building this extension? Did you point people, the existing engineers, towards it?
We started dedicating more resources towards it. We slowly added more and more engineers towards that side as we saw it accelerating. Part of it was we also wanted to get it in front of customers and see how they responded. And I think as we saw more of a customer pull for it, that gave us more confidence to then put more resources behind it. That was a lot of what prompted us to go and raise our latest round, and now really growing the team to double down on that side, just because we're seeing like both the demand for what we're building and the problem, more importantly, like the problem that we're solving of how do companies ship 10 times more code than they ever have been able to before. Every company now has that problem and is now looking for something to solve it.
So Brad, shifting gears back to you, you guys have a bit of a different situation where you've really changed the direction of the company. How did you ask people's opinion? Did you, as the founder, say, hey, this is the way we're going to do it? That's part one. And then again, back to the engineering point of just about building this new product. You mentioned starting a little incrementally, but how did you make that shift to just go all in, rip the Band-Aid?
Yeah, I would say we didn't change the pain point we were solving for the customer. Customers were always using our platform, like whether it's Instacart or it's SoFi, they're always using us to build and deliver internal applications for their ops teams, right? And so that has been unchanged completely. It's just, in order to solve that problem, we had to come up with a completely different solution that was post, this AI world, basically, in this AI world. And so, we made the decision to kind of, your question is kind of, what made a decision to go all in and not do it incrementally anymore?
Yeah.
It was basically we saw companies like Replit growing now 0 to 100 million in 6-7 months, Lovable doing something similar. And we were like, hey, we started realizing that for people who are less technical or semi-technical audience of ours, IT teams, data teams, vibe coding is like a ChatGPT moment. It's the iPhone moment for them. They've never been able to build, and now they can. And so it's this magical moment, and I think that's why the adoption of all these tools has been so fast. And so when we saw that, we were like, wow, we can't miss the iPhone moment. We got to go all in. And we had some internal prototypes at that time, and it was very compelling because no one had built enterprise vibe coding on top of your integrations with your permissions, right? With pipelines for audit logs and analytics and all the deep enterprise problems we solve. And so we were like, hey, we have something pretty special. So we started demoing that to customers, and it became clear, okay, we have something early, like let's go all in and let's deliver this thing.
I like that comment around vibe coding having its ChatGPT moment. Did you, when you're talking about some of these enterprise customers like an Instacart, their needs are going to be much greater than like a 5-person organization. As you thought about some of the existing governance and tools that you built, how much of that was relevant versus how much did you have to actually start building, again, like vibe coding from the consumer perspective, playing around versus at a scale of a large organization?
Yeah, the whole like governance and data integration platform we have was 100% the same, no change. The only difference was we had to do some like context engineering to feed the right context based on the governance rules to the AI model when a user prompts. So that was the only like net new thing. But the actual platform of connecting your integration, setting the permissions, hooking up to your observability provider, analytics provider, audit logging provider, adding your authentication and SSO, permissioning, the whole 9 yards of all the enterprise functionality was actually 100% the same. So we had some huge advantage from the original product. And then we had a, let's say, disadvantage, which is we weren't AI first. But we kind of became AI first in that moment, and now we have both. And so that's kind of what's been super interesting for enterprise customers.
And this for both of you guys, we can start with Meryl. How do you think about the existing team and the skill set, not just the readiness, but the ability to leverage some of these tools and really move faster? We keep hearing about these cracked engineers. And what's interesting from talking to startups that pitch us, later stage portcos, it's not like it's just a young kid's game. We've heard of senior engineers that are kind of orchestrating using vibe coding and other generative tools to just move 10x faster than they would have.
Yeah.
We've heard of kids right out of college that are just, the velocity is insane. So we've seen both archetypes, but I'm curious as you evaluate both the companies, how much did you have internally versus you had to hire for?
I think we had a decent amount and we cultivated a lot internally. I think the biggest thing was, I actually think it was it was really good for us that we had a pretty wide range of like interest levels in AI, of like AI, some like complete AI maxis, some AI skeptics, and I think that diversity of like thought on AI actually helped us a lot because in the beginning there were a lot of folks on the team who questioned, could we build something that was at our quality bar, or could we actually produce something with AI that we felt was would be ready to ship to users, and I think that was a good kind of check metric of, can we make even the most skeptical engineer on our team love this product and feel, if they would be sad if we had to turn it off internally. That's just like such a good bar for, have you created something of value? And that was basically the standard that we held ourselves to before we released Diamond, our AI code review agent. And I think then the other thing that's been helpful is, as we've gone along and seen adoption of these tools internally, just creating moments of like sharing learnings. We have like an NJI tools channel that was created a while ago where folks will drop in like new tools they're using and teach something about it. We have lunch and learns.
Is the team still predominantly New York?
Yeah, we're still all New York.
Do you feel like that's a superpower as you're going through this moment of change? And we'll get to you. I'm not sure if you guys are remote or all in, but has that helped you accelerate some of this change?
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of like, hey, come over to my desk and check this out, or like people at lunch will be like sharing something on their laptop, or we'll organize the lunch and learns. I think that is a big part of this, is just like showing each other in person how to use these tools and sharing best practices, and everyone just kind of gets excited when they see like the new capabilities that someone else on the team has unlocked.
I'm actually unfamiliar. You guys remote or big presence?
No, we're HQ'd in New York. Yeah, right at Union Square, and so about half our company is in New York, and then half of it is remote.
And how have you thought about sort of the team in terms of who had the skills, how people have gotten up to speed who may not have had them before?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has, very similar to what Meryl mentioned, has been like learned on the job, let's say, right? Because you can't find someone that has worked with LLMs for like, 5 years or anything,
the job
right?
Description of like 5 years of experience.
Yeah, so what we started with was the people that were, I like what you call it, AI maximalists. Like the people that were just so passionate about AI, they started all of our AI initiatives. And so it was just natural for them. They already believed in it. And then we had others in the company that, were still coming to terms of like, hey, like we can now use AI for so many of our workflows. And so we started with a small group. And in the end, I think that was actually a mistake we made, right? We only started with a small group. I think we should have just gone all in and had everyone update to this new way of working and also understand all the depths of building an AI product. And so, because it affects literally everything that you do. Like to give you one example, originally when we were designing the product, we had one piece designing for the developer experience. So if you're an engineer, you're writing code. Another group is designing for a semi-technical person who's using the low code type of piece. But now we actually are designing for an AI agent as a core user of the product, right? Because underneath Superblocks is this definition, and that definition needs to work really well with the latest and greatest foundation model advancements. And so we actually have to make some big changes around that.
I think there's a great point in there around, like, in order to develop, much like with any product or in any area, to develop good taste in something, you have to be exposed to a lot of examples of it. And if you're not using AI products regularly, there's no way for you to develop an understanding of, like, what makes an AI product good, what are the constraints of it, how do I think in this new way or design for this new type of tool. And the teammates that I think were adopting AI, like, into more parts of their workflows, like, I think just understand how to create AI products better. And I'm not sure if you've seen that similarly.
Yeah, definitely. I think like everyone is learning from each other, Twitter, et cetera. It is like a totally new market, and it's kind of like this time right now where if even Google is not safe with their Google search business, like, who is? You have to make a big change. And so I think it's a very exciting time, and the engineers that have embraced it, which is at this point 100% of the company, are having a lot of fun with it. Turns out engineers love new tech.
So switching gears now, you've made the decision to go all in, you've got the team in place. How do you think about product in today's world? Velocity on the one hand matters more than ever. The ground is moving underneath your feet. You're getting like crammed down from the skies. Like, how much of it is your own taste, to use your parlance? How much of it is customer feedback? How do you go skate where the puck is going? It seems like such a multivariate problem that's quite difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, in terms of, let's call it product market fit, right? There's the product and there's the market. When the market variable is moving very quickly, product market fit is temporary. And so if you think about, like, the 2000s, right? Maybe you find a way to solve a problem. You then can go build an initial solution. You then can go scale a sales team for like half a decade or maybe even a decade on the back of that. And then maybe in the late 2010s, maybe it's a few years, right? I think right now in AI, that market variable is moving so quickly, it's 3 months sometimes. And so if you're not on top of it, I think you could lose the market very quickly. But similarly, you can win the market very quickly, because right now it's not an advantage to be an incumbent, to have a lot of legacy. It's actually an advantage to be able to be very flexible.
And Meryl, for you, you have customers that are already using the base product. They're pulling you with some of this direction. How much are you taking their input? How much are you saying, hey, this is where we think this has to be based on tinkering and learning and understanding the models maybe at a deeper level than some of them?
Yeah, I think that in some ways when the market is moving so quickly and when the capabilities of this are evolving as fast as they are today, like, user input is more important than ever. I think users have a great sense of like, do they like this or not? Is this solving the pain or not? What is now the bottleneck in my workflow? And I think not necessarily taking their direct input on this is what I want, but I think being really attuned to what is the pain that they're feeling, and where can you effectively, like, build product to solve that is something that I think now is just more important than ever, because in any other signal, like sales cycles, by the time that you've, like, gone through the whole sales cycle, everything's shifted, as you say, and that's really the only signal that I think matters now.
And how much, though, I mean, for us at Workbench, we're very much use case driven in many areas, but at the same time, you want to avoid that pitfall in a rapidly moving market where, there's that old adage, people would have just wanted a faster horse instead of a car. How do you guys think about that dynamic where the whole team is now behind this, but that you're not going this way, and then you have to shift immediately because of some change in a model or something, or other capabilities?
I mean, I think building product is always a little bit of gut feel at the end of the day. And so, we spend as much time, like right now, my schedule is basically, I do customer calls back to back in the morning and afternoon. And then I spend the late afternoon or early evening with the engineering team, and then the late evening is recruiting. And so that cycle is like, I'm spending a bunch of time with customers. I like to be, like, very close to them, especially when things are changing so quickly. And then I'm meeting with product and engineering. We're making some changes. I'm telling them what I learned from the meetings. And so that iteration cycle is just very aggressive right now.
And it's interesting to see that we talked about this a little bit, both on the product side and the go-to-market, in order to just survive and thrive in today's world. what are some of the challenges for even you personally as a founder that maybe people in the audience can learn from? Because that is a jam-packed schedule. It's definitely wartime mode as a founder. How do you juggle all of it, and what are things that maybe you were doing that you had to take off your schedule because you've got this routine?
Yeah, I mean, like I think in a company you have all these processes like one-on-ones, you have weekly meetings, like you basically just cancel all of that, right? No more one-on-ones. Like I don't do any one-on-ones, and we don't do like weekly meetings either. And so it's all just either we're talking to a customer, or we're talking about the product, and that's like basically my schedule, or I'm talking to a candidate. And so it's like very extreme right now. But it's like you only have time for the things that can move the needle in the business. And I'd be curious to hear your
I'd say that for us, it's actually been the opposite challenge of like, it's so easy, I think, in this time to be sucked into scrolling on X, seeing what the latest model updates are, like trying to incorporate that into the product, talking to customers, hearing what they want. Like, I think that it takes more so than ever like a conscious effort to say, okay, let's pause for a moment, let's take a step back, let's figure out, are we actually building the right thing? How do we, like, what is our view on how this space is going to evolve? Like, are we building too much towards like one particular model, or are we doing too much scaffolding on this that's just going to get wiped out with the next model iteration? Like, I think these questions are hard to ask in this world where like everything's changing every few minutes underneath you. But I think making the time to actually take that step back has been something that's been really helpful for us.
What is your North Star then to know that as you're making some of these philosophical bets that you're going in the right direction?
I think there are a few patterns that we've seen play out as this has evolved, and part of this, like the star definitely moves. Like it's definitely not, there's not necessarily like any of these things stay particularly constant, but a few patterns that we've seen play out. Like one in particular is like if anyone's heard of like the bitter lesson, the Rich Sutton idea of basically, if you're building a lot of scaffolding and if you're having to do a ton of like complicated like multi-agent orchestration or like crazy prompt design, you're probably just going to get wiped out by the next model iteration, and you shouldn't waste your time on it. Like just wait for the model to get better. And that's one thing we've seen play out a few times. We've really tried to incorporate that. I'd say the other thing is just really focusing on like solving the user problem. And I think Brad, you had this from the beginning of figuring out what was the use case, like figuring out who are you building for and what are they trying to do fundamentally. And as long as you keep an eye, as long as you like, really stay focused on that and always keep that in mind of what you're building, I think that ends up making sure that you're on the right path and like building something that's actually addressing the need versus like chasing the trend or going off in a tangential direction. Like it's so easy to be distracted, I think, by some of these directions you can go now with like AI and vibe coding, and it would have been very easy, and some folks all tried to get us to like, oh, why don't you guys just go do like a vibe coding product, or like why don't you go into code gen right now? And I think it took real discipline and focus to say like, no, it's a hot space, but we're not going to do that. Like our goal is like everything that happens after code is generated.
Yeah, can I like add something to what Meryl said, which I really liked about building the architecture and then a model change comes and it could wipe the whole thing out. I think actually there is no way to protect against changing your architecture. I don't think that you can have the perfect architecture and then anticipate all the model changes and then not have to rip anything out as you go. I actually think you need to build knowing that the architecture has to have certain areas of flexibility, and then sometimes you have to rip stuff out. Like there are certain things that like we built originally that we're like, hey, we're going to use small models because we want very low latency. And in the end, that was less powerful when we strung everything together than if we just bet on a foundation model. So we reconfigured. I'm sure we'll make other big changes, but we actually designed from day one now for, hey, things are going to change.
Yeah.
Would you guys say that tech debt is maybe a feature, not a bug these days, just as you're moving so fast?
I still think it's a bug. I still think it's easier, like the interest rate is not as bad anymore, but it's still pretty bad.
Yeah, I think you got to get good at like, understanding sunk cost in engineering. And I think that's something that, in the old world, I used to work at Datadog, and when we build products at Datadog, this is 4 years ago now, we would design a product, we would like write the specs, we'd have the engineering doc, we'd go and execute that thing, we'd do our like quarterly planning, and the market would like not change that much. and that was totally fine. And I think that just doesn't work in today's world.
So I want to jump into two different areas. First, messaging, and then qualification on the sales front. With the ability to get more customer pull and move faster than ever, there's also more noise than ever from companies younger than you, companies older than you, people trying to pivot, people just saying they do what you do but they don't. Let's start with you, Brett. Like, how has the competition changed? How do you think about differentiating yourself? Where are you okay that people are making similar noise and you just out execute? Like, what does that look like on the demand gen marketing pipeline generation front these days?
Yeah, I mean, we're very focused on enterprises building internal tools in like regulated companies because that's where the operational workload is extremely intensive. That's where the pain point is the highest. And then you need to solve very deep, complex enterprise problems. And even though there's many vibe coding products out there that are great for consumers, they don't solve the complex enterprise problem. And so we're actually, though like people might think of vibe coding, us and them, et cetera, if you actually get down to like what a real enterprise, like a Fortune 500 might want, those tools can only be used for basic prototyping. If you want to actually go to something that works in production that meets your security, compliance, and IT standards, you need actually something different. And so we're building a very deep product for that.
Do your targets appreciate that and they're not even picking up the phone when some of the consumer-oriented vibe coding people call, or is there noise that you're having to get through?
I mean, if a customer doesn't know how to spell governance, we don't talk to them, because that's like the one thing that really matters in our product is it's not just about building apps, it's about how do you govern them at scale, because what's happening in the enterprise is you're going from a team that's just engineers building software to basically IT teams, data teams, even some technical business teams, and so the amount of sprawl is huge, and so we focus on customers that care about governance at the end of the day.
Does that mean that it's a multi-stakeholder sale now, or is there still one champion that's buying it?
We've kind of sold historically to either CTO or CIO, and so that's completely unchanged. But it's probably leading more CIO as we go, and these IT teams are becoming full stack development teams, and I think that's one of the trends we're betting on, and we have a goal which is about the next billion developers at work. And so if you think about that, I think that's going to be centralized, of the control for all of that will be centralized to IT, but the democratization will be across the business units.
And Meryl, from your perspective, you've sold into very large companies, you also service a lot of just scaling startups. How have you thought about focusing? How have you thought about the messaging? Is it the same to both groups? Is it different?
Yeah, I think that, as I was saying earlier, I think that everyone is starting to feel these challenges of scale much earlier than they ever have before, and I think that one of the hard parts that we've had is kind of defining that messaging and making sure and kind of tying together the different parts of the product, because Graphite has this code review platform, it has a merge queue, it has like automations and like enterprise workflows for code review. It now has this AI review agent as well. And honestly, I think one of the things that we're still very much working on and refining now is like, how do we tie these all together and really communicate the idea that Graphite is not just one of these products. It's the whole is much greater than the sum of the parts, and all of these pieces are necessary in like the code review platform built for the age of AI. And telling that story of how everything weaves together, and why smaller teams need this now, why like everybody who's building software with a team and trying to ship quickly needs these tools, like I think is one of the most important things that we're focused on right now.
And does the competitive set change from who you were fighting against before? Is it similar and now you just have the wider portfolios you're saying?
Yeah, it's incredibly competitive as a space, right? Because you have all of the foundation model companies are now going into code gen, and then even now they're starting to realize like, oh, the next step after we generate the code, the next step is reviewing it. And so you see Claude is releasing something here, Cursor released their bug bot. You have a million YC companies that are all doing AI code review of some sort. Like it is just incredibly, it's competitive, and there's new companies that are popping up pretty much weekly in the space. So, but I think that's one of the places where having the foundation that we built before the era of AI is super helpful for us, because we can say, we've been building for Shopify and Snowflake and all these great companies for years now, and we've had them, we've like grown within their engineering teams organically. We've built trust with them, and because of that, we are then the first stop for when they look for a vendor to build AI code review, because their engineers already use our tools for their workflow. And not only that, we can then build a much better, like, fully integrated experience because we own the surface where the code review is happening. Our agent integrates really nicely within that in a way that you can't get if you just plug in a bot to GitHub. So I think building that foundation and being able to draw on that has really helped us to evolve and deliver our AI product.
When you're going after net new customers, like you mentioned Snowflake, where you already have the base and you can expand with them. If you're going after someone new who might be a Cursor user today, how do you message around, hey, I know you have this, and they're trying to go kind of right a little bit. You want us as kind of this best of breed platform?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple different angles there. I think one is that if you look at who Cursor is building for, obviously they have a lot of enterprise usage, but their real focus is small teams, individuals, not quite vibe coders, I'd say, but like the next level up from that. And their interest is always going to be serving that more entry level user, and they're not going to be plugging into all of the different systems that an enterprise is using. You probably have a similar story around like those deep integrations and understanding of processes in a way that like Cursor is not going to build that expertise. They're going to be focused on competing with Claude Code and OpenAI and wherever Windsurf landed. That's just like they just can't specialize on building for large customers, and I think that's kind of where we're able to differentiate. The other piece I'd say is that and this is for code review in particular, I think it's a story of like, do you believe that there's only going to be one provider of code within the enterprise in the long term? And I think if the answer is yes, then sure, that provider can probably just build their own code review platform and own the whole thing end to end. But if you look at how this is evolving, there's going to be like a Claude Code, there's going to be a Superblocks, there's going to be like Hex and Vercel v0 and Figma and like all these different specialized agents for different use cases that then all need to flow into one repo. And as long as that's the case and you have this heterogeneity in sources of code, you need one platform where that all comes together for code review, and that's exactly what we are.
So we talked messaging a little bit for you. How about use cases? Are you talking about the breadth of the platform and the flexibility? Are you coming in with 2 or 3 that you're seeing repeat that maybe even have other folks using already that you can point to?
Yeah, like we're basically selling on like what I would call like technical use cases rather than like business use cases. So like what's the technical problem that they need to solve for has to be the same company to company, right? They have to build N number of applications. They have to have a backlog. They have to connect to many systems, whether that's Databricks, Snowflake, kind of like what you were talking about, right? It's the complexity that we're looking for that's the same.
Are there specific patterns that you're seeing where they need to connect to these 3 different systems to do X function?
I mean, there's our core bread and butter is building applications for the frontline operations team. And so almost all of our best customers are doing exactly that. And so, but each ops team, depending on if you're, Instacart or you're a carrier or something else, they are building something that is bespoke to their business. And so part of the whole idea of Superblocks is that there's no SaaS provider. You have to build custom software. And so when you have to build custom software, the use cases are fairly long tail, but the platform is kind of the same across them.
And when I think about the competitive set, I assume probably historically you went after maybe a retool in some of these companies, but you guys have always leaned more enterprise. How does that look today? Are they in the conversations? Is it more like Replit, like you said, or others?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved very dramatically in the last, let's say, even 90 days. I would say we were fairly head-to-head with Retool in many, many opportunities that we were in. Today, we're in a engagement with a large social network, and it's basically Replit, who is the other tool in consideration, and that was not true even 90 days ago. And so I think the market's moved very quickly, and I think that the way I look at it is we were originally fishing in a lake, and it was calm, and we knew the exact competitors, and it was a smaller opportunity. And now we're fishing in the ocean, and there's competitors all over the place, but you could catch some really huge fish. And so the opportunity is bigger than ever, but the competition is fiercer than ever, and you're getting competition from different angles. And then on top of that, customers are also somewhat trying to get educated with what's happened over the last 90 to 120 days.
Are there certain opportunities, and this will be for both of you, that maybe you would disqualify now because of how fast you have to move and the market's moving, that could have maybe been in the ICP before, but now you're like, you're just not going to move fast enough, I don't want to spend cycles on my limited team on it?
I think, and maybe this happens for a lot of founders, but like you're always like thinking, hey, I want to start with PLG at the bottom of the market. And so you start with that, but what you learn is, where does your product actually have the massive differentiation and pull? And for us, that's the enterprise. And so, yeah, I would say if you're really small, we actually won't sell to you. So our sales team won't engage in extremely small businesses because I think there's a lot of great solutions for them, and I don't think we're super differentiated because they don't need any of the governance piece of the platform. And so even if we sell them, they might churn, right? But in an enterprise case, what's that?
I think it's an important discipline that you have.
Well, I think I would say it's not even discipline. It's like you learn from iteration. We've like iterated to like learn where the fit is and where the differentiate and where's like the problem that's not being solved by many other teams out there.
I think one of the interesting disqualifications that we've developed in the past few months is if a company we're trying to sell to isn't using other AI tools, we rarely will sell to them now, because I think there is just that indicates something around like their approach to like data concerns, their approach to like adopting new tools, how interested their eng team is in adopting AI into their workflows. Like, it's such a good predictor. Like, if we see a team that's adopted Cursor or Windsurf, like we know that we can sell Graphite into them really easily, and that's such a good signal. And like the lack thereof is a strong counter signal, or says something about their culture that means it's going to be harder for them to adopt a tool like Graphite.
So I want to make sure we have time for audience questions, but the last question I'll leave you guys with for now is, if you started over the company today, what's one thing that you would not do again?
You want to go first?
Yeah. I think one mistake that we've made in building the company is, I think and it's easy to do in dev tools in particular, I think, is we've kind of swung back and forth on this pendulum between serving individuals and serving enterprises. And it's very easy, I think, to get, as you say, like the PLG motion is really attractive. Like, it's fun to build something that's like bottom up adoptable and has a lot of like groundswell of adoption, and it's big on X and on Hacker News. And I think that we've kind of made this mistake where we've built somewhat for that, but we haven't fully committed to doing the individual adoption thing. Or on the flip side of that, we've built tools that work really well for large teams, but we haven't hard committed to the enterprise adoption model, and haven't invested enough at times in building out our sales org and figuring out what the feature set is that's really going to let us differentiate and serve customers of that scale. And I think waffling on that is really wasteful of cycles, and I think we've spent a lot of time like going back and forth on that decision. And I think it's still like that disagreement or that tension internally is something that you see in our pricing, and still something that we're trying to figure out to this day with the company. But I think having a clear perspective on that, if I were to do it again, like I think I'd say like, okay, we're doing one or we're doing the other, and just stick to that model from the beginning.
Yeah, and I'd say like for us, so initially, when you have these happy customers, we had like, let's say a handful of happy customers, then we're like, hey, let's grow as like fast as possible. Let's go to like hundreds, and that's what we did in the first version of our product. And I'd say the big potential mistake there is it's actually better to go slow to go fast. It's better to go really deep with a smaller group of customers and get to something that is like jaw-dropping user experience, and then to scale, even if that takes a little bit longer. So on this new version of the product, that's exactly what we're doing. We're not rushing it. We want to like nail it and then we're like really going to scale it aggressively after. But we're actually going to invest because we're solving complex, deep enterprise problems. That takes longer, and there's a ton of demand, right? Like just people looking at AI products in the market, there's a ton of demand, but I think the discipline of like go slow to go fast is probably the big change I'd make.
Actually, one more before I open up. As a result of that, how do both of you guys think about implementation, which is, I guess, right, we talked marketing, sales, product, now that last piece, like you've got someone and you're trying to really both make it a white glove experience more than ever, but also learn from that. Has that changed from prior generation of both of your products and how you think about that?
Ooh. I think that it's put more emphasis for us on like doing a really good like proof of value or like proof of concept for customers. Like it really is the type of thing that you have to with AI. You have to experience it. You have to like see what the quality of responses are like. You have to like find that one bug that that our code reviewer saves from getting out to production, or that security vulnerability. And I think if you have, it's like creating the conditions to have that aha moment, and if you can do that effectively, then the sale becomes very easy all of a sudden. But if you don't have enough space and enough like time within for them to like experience it and play around with it and get to that, then I think it's a lot harder. And sometimes companies will not get there, or like we won't. If in the early days we weren't investing enough time to like set up their repos properly, like help them take their rules or their set of guidelines for how they write code and incorporate that into the reviewer. And I think unless you really do that and like teach, kind of guide them on like how do you use this new generation of tools, it's harder for them. It's easy. I mean, if you remember like the first time like you probably tried to get ChatGPT to do something, it probably fell over, like didn't do exactly what you wanted, and there's like this initial disappointment of that, and you have to kind of help customers push beyond that initial disappointment and really understand how to like extract the value out of this. And because then when they get there, it's like holy shit, this is really transformative.
Yeah, I'd say like many AI companies, we've kind of taken a page from Palantir and started a forward deployed engineering group. And so ironically, the product is like easier to use than ever, but I actually think it's the most important time to actually add real implementation, working with customers, because it's all about getting to production. It's not about prototypes, right? It's all about production. And production is independent of your product, complex for an enterprise. It requires business process change. And if you have people on your team that are in the customer's office, environment, et cetera, you're just going way deeper on the learnings from that. And so we've changed our go-to-market model to have this forward deployed group that lives in the customer's offices basically, and that's been super successul for us.
That's awesome. I'm gonna live up to my word and let other folks get some questions, so I don't hog it all.
Viewers. Hey, my name's Omer. I'm a product lead at an IDE agentic coding company called Augment Code. We're very research heavy. We have like a number of researchers on staff. We're like 3 years old. And I'm wondering, like, you all are both coming from companies that did not have like AI expertise sort of baked into the company's DNA. There are things like prompt engineering, which I think lots of engineers can sort of speak English and do that part, but there's also things like prompt caching or post-training or all of these things that require that sort of deep, I think, technical knowledge. And I'm curious, maybe the question I could ask is, how would your journey have been different if you had that expertise, or do you feel like maybe that expertise is like not quite as necessary? If you could just speak to that, that'd be awesome.
Question. I'd say for us, we were somewhat lucky in that my co-founder Tomas had done a good amount of like ML projects in school, and like I'd played around with some of it before. So I wouldn't say that we were deep experts in it, but we certainly had enough competency to like start to be dangerous. And I think then we hired, then we pretty quickly moved to hire folks that had played around with it before, that had built some deeper expertise. I'd say we're still not like a super research heavy company, but having folks that have the more, I mean, you can't get the like 5 years of experience obviously, but I think starting to bring in folks that have worked on more AI native products, that's something that's helped us out a lot to kind of like bridge that gap. But A lot of this, especially for if you're not building foundation models, if you're not like doing a lot of like fine tuning, a lot of this can be learned fairly quickly. You just have to like give the team space to play around with it and develop the competency, and that's largely what we've done. And I think they've really enjoyed that and been able to like get to a really high level of operating on this, given the relative lack of experience they came in with.
Yeah, and I'd add like, I don't think most startups can afford AI researchers, and
Especially
so
not now.
yeah, and so I think
We can't fund that much.
Spend the entire round.
Figure that
so
out.
yeah, so I think you have to be like really creative about how you go about it, right? When Meta's paying hundreds of millions of dollars for an AI researcher, even one that's like maybe a very junior AI researcher is still going to be unaffordable if you're a VC-backed A round, B round company. And so I think like if you're building application layer, I think a lot of it can be learned, and it's really you're doing applied AI. Like you're betting on foundation models or open source models, and you're figuring out how to do good like context engineering or good validation after the prompt gets back, and how do you loop and things like that. And I think like all of that is like within the grasp of most senior engineers, I would say. It is just, there is a new way of thinking about it, and so, but once you've kind of committed to that, I think most people can learn it. We're great engineers.
Thank you.
We're going to take sides. We'll go left, right. So Stavros, you're next.
Hi guys, great session. Stavros Zaroudakis, I provide advisor for companies like yours and enterprises. Professor at NYU, head of AI until recently for an enterprise. So I would like to know what is your strategy, both of you, on how to stay ahead when, if or when foundational model providers make your product feature in foundation models.
It's a very like salient question. I think every company that's building on foundation models is in some at some level in danger of being subsumed by the foundation model companies themselves. But I think it comes back to what are you focused on and what are they focused on? Can you do you have some sort of differentiation in terms of understanding of the customer, in terms of distribution, in terms of even brand and design become really strong differentiators now? Like, can you develop, and this is true for anyone starting out and building a company as well, I think more so than ever, like those things are the differentiators that matter. It's not as much product, because product can be copied pretty quickly now. It's very much like, do you understand the problem deeply? Do you understand the customer? Do you have some sort of differentiation other than product that you can lean on? And for us, I think that's how we think about it, is like, what can we do that Anthropic is not going to build, either because they can't, because they don't have the expertise, or it'd be very expensive for them to develop it, or just because it doesn't make sense for them. It's not on their like core path. They're focused on fighting OpenAI and Cursor. They're not worried about building merge queues for 5,000 person engineering teams and getting into all the deep optimizations there. It just doesn't really make sense for them to do that. And obviously, in the limit, you can worry about, maybe AI gets so good that they can just develop all of these competencies. But I think we're quite a ways off from that. And the thing that matters is just focusing on being really clear about what are those differentiators, and then doubling down on those and staying away from the things that are like easily commoditizable, or at least not betting the company on it, not putting too much on something that is easy for a foundation model company to copy.
I think that was a perfect answer. I agree.
Bounce back to this side.
Hey, this question is for Brad. What's the future of DSLs now that code gen is cheap?
Yeah.
Are they obsolete, or are they more important than ever?
Yeah, it's a great question. So maybe just to define, like DSL is like a domain-specific language. So a lot of products that are like low-code products will have them as the underlying definition. So we made a decision to ditch the DSL and go to code, mainly because models are trained on code, and so therefore they should be better with less work from us. So I think it's probably product dependent, would be my guess. In our space, being on top of code provides many other benefits, such as code review is easier, such as customers can be less worried about DSL lock-in or vendor lock-in because it's just code. They can always leave your product and they can run it themselves. And so I think in our space, I think it's going to be critically important to be code. I think there's many other products, like there's a whole space of workflow automation that's happening right now that is, most of it is DSL based, and I think maybe that will be fine. And so I think it's really context dependent per product.
My name is Tashi. I'm a co-founder of a startup that helps startup founder find EMF, grow, and then be investor ready. So I've talked to Brad earlier, and I heard Mary, you talk about the importance of listening to your customers, right? So I have a question. How have you engaged with your customers, right? On one hand, there is primary data where you try to interview them, understand their experience. On the other, there are secondary data where you look at metrics, analytics. So how have you balanced trying to understand your customer?
I can answer maybe really quickly. I think you basically look at all the things you can do. First one is talking to customers. That is table stakes. You have to do that. You can look at metrics of the usage. I think that's pretty key. And then there's just your own team. Our team are users of the product. I'm sure yours is too. So they have tons of ideas. And so you really are just looking at all the different areas that you get feedback. And then you have some things that are just you believe should be built in the world. And that's another category that's very hard to even explain, but you just kind of gut feel think, okay, we should go in this direction, we should build this thing. And it's kind of like the ask for a faster horse type of scenario. And I think it's a mix of all of those. I don't think there's one answer. You get your customer feedback on what to build from all of the above.
Yeah, that's a great answer. There's sort of almost like vibe PMing of sorts. I think there's a part of it is just it's hard to integrate. There are so many different sources of inputs now. There's the quantitative, there's the qualitative, there's what other companies are doing, there's what your team is saying. That a lot of the difficulty of being a founder, especially right now, is just taking this this deluge of information and more so than ever before, I think, integrating it and just making a call of this is where we're going to go, this is where I see things happening, and what we need to build towards. And that's I think part of that's the challenge of being a founder right now.
So we'll do one more from this side, one more from this side. All right, George.
Oh, the mic. All right. This question's for. Thanks. Brad, this question's for you. You talked about FDEs being the way you get to production faster, right? Time to value. How do you manage the tension of the FDEs, the person that makes your stuff work right now, even if there's product gaps, defects, whatever you want to call it, versus this very important customer needs a new feature. We have a software developer in their office. They could write it. And then how do we get that back into the core product?
Yeah, great question. So I think the way we do the FD is maybe not as extreme as Palantir. Palantir is hey, anything you want, we can do it. We'll just go put a software engineer on it in your office. We don't quite do that. So we maybe don't follow their Bible of FDE to the extreme way that they're doing it. Ours is a lot more on, it's more close to I'd say classical, what people would call PS or professional services, and just making customers successful. And so ours is much closer to that, supporting the existing product. It's still a product company, not a services company. And so that's kind of how we're thinking about it. I don't know, Meryl, if you want to add something to that.
I mean, we have a similar, we actually adopted a similar model of forward deployed engineers. I'd say we're maybe not quite as far on the professional services side of it. It's more of implementation and getting the initial integrations right, making sure that we're connecting to the right pieces of context and other systems, and then helping them with things like how do you set up your merge queue to optimally work for the scale of companies and the number of pull requests that they're trying to merge, things like that just require somebody technical who understands their implementation has helped us out a lot. but I think we've really tried to stay away from the point of like having to do a lot of one-off implementation work. I think especially now with AI tools. Well, with AI, it's like companies, a lot of teams can do that themselves, and if you can give them the tools to like empower them to like meet you where they need to be, I think customers are getting further than ever on their own, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and I'd summarize and say it just depends on your product. Some products you're going to need, extremely heavy hand-holding, and some are just like very self-serve, low touch, and it's, I've worked in like both types of companies before, and I think my learning is that it just depends on the product and the category.
We have one last question.
Thanks a lot. Michael, I'm with JetBrains, and I wanted to ask you about the business models. So as I've seen personally, in a lot of cases, the companies, as they move towards AI, heavy LLM usage and all of those things, the marginality and profitability drops a lot, so the new business models arise. Did it affect you? Did you see the change?
I think this is another wonderful property of starting with something that wasn't AI native is that it's enabled us to invest heavily in AI without worrying as much about the margins, because you have something that's core that is like unrelated to like model spend or inference costs. Like you can have that be like the primary like source of margins, and then we basically run our code review agent at cost or even slightly in the red, because we can kind of support it with the rest of the product. And so for us, I think that's been like a real like benefit for having something else that's not entirely like AI native. It is forcing us to rethink, I'd say, how we price, because the per seat model the dev tools have all favored in the past. Like I think we're even seeing anecdotally now, like hiring is slowing down. Companies are not adding as many seats, even as there's all this talk of like the one person unicorn startup, which I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're certainly seeing smaller and smaller teams getting to higher revenues and building more, and it is challenging that model of per seat pricing and forcing us to think about like what does like an understandable usage-based pricing model look like, where I think tokens are very opaque and leads to a lot of user confusion, and I'm sure the Cursor team can tell you all about the challenges associated with that in the past couple weeks. But I do think there's this challenge of like how do you make pricing that we haven't figured out yet, of like how do you do usage-based pricing in a way that both makes sense to the user and maps to like something that they understand of units of work, something that's very clear, but that also maps nicely to your unit costs underneath, because sometimes for us the challenge is we could charge per pull request reviewed, but some PRs are hundreds of thousands of lines long, and some are 50, and the token usage underneath that is just so vastly different that if we reduce that down to just one unit, we're going to get ourselves or our customers in trouble pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I'd say like pricing is like the product. It's just going to evolve, and it's going to continue to evolve, and that's like always been true in SaaS companies and B2B companies. And I think for us, like we started with a pure seat based. That was our original product. It will now move towards more like seat plus usage, and but the mix of that may change over time as some models do some very long running things. Like people can go generate some pretty crazy apps that cost a fair amount of money for even one prompt. One generation is just very long. It's very compute intensive, and so I think over time these things change. We're evolving our pricing with the market, and I'm sure next year we'll also evolve it again.
Awesome. Well, I think on that note, I just want to say, both Brad, Merle, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being transparent, thoughtful, and really just sharing so much about how you're navigating these uncertain times with the audience. Let's give a round of applause.